You know, looking at all this stuff in the bigger view, the Middle East would not, and I think it's important for us every now and then to just step back and look at least, the last 5, 6 decades and say, what have we done that we can learn from? What have we done smart? What have we done stupid that we can learn from? And we know that in 1979, I believe it was, Maggie Thatcher was wildly unpopular. Actually, I'm not sure of the year of the Falkland War, but I should drop into our chat room. Sue probably knows it right off the top of her head. But in any case, back in the day, Maggie Thatcher was insanely unpopular. She was busting the unions. She was 1982. Thank you, Troy. She was doing all this stuff. And, the Argentinians, one story of history is that they started it, and others that the British started it, whoever started it. Maggie Thatcher decided to have a little war over the Falkland Islands. The little war just lasted a little while, and the British won. Yeah, April 2nd, 1982. Thank you, Sue. And that little war was, like, incredible for her popularity. It really helped out. And, prior to that, up until that point, the conventional wisdom was don't go starting any wars, right? Lyndon Johnson tried that in Vietnam. It did not work out well. Don't do it again. That was kind of worldwide conventional wisdom, or at least in the Western world. And then Maggie Thatcher had her little war in Argentina, and it was like, oh, wow. That worked. Double bonus, the Argentinians started it, right? So Maggie Thatcher really looked like a hero, right? You're not going to step on us. And so Reagan looked at that and said, oh, wow, this is cool. And he said, let's take out Grenada, right? It's a socialist country. We don't want those thinking socialists in the Western Hemisphere, and we're not, we can't go to war with Cuba, but Grenada, hey, Maurice Bishop is running the country. He's an avowed socialist. Let's do it. And so we attacked Grenada. Now, weirdly enough, Grenada was one of 3 nations in the world that North Korea had, mutual agreements with, mostly technology transfer stuff, but they were doing business together, North Korea and Grenada. Hey, communists stick together. So when Reagan attacked Grenada, that was the point at which North Korea started getting really nervous. My God, if he could take out Grenada, he could take out us. And so they started planning for, they'd already been planning out, they didn't start getting nervous then. They'd fought a war against us that just leveled Pyongyang, the capital city of North Korea. There was literally one building left standing. Millions of people died in that war. It was a horrific war. So Reagan has his little war in Grenada, and Bush Sr. goes, hey, that's kind of cool. You got popular as a result of that. And so did Maggie Thatcher. I guess, the post-Vietnam rules have changed. So I'm going to have a little war with Saddam Hussein. And so, he had his person, April Gillespie, tell Saddam Hussein, yeah, if you want to take Kuwait, that's fine, no problem. And then as soon as Saddam Hussein took Kuwait, because they were slant drilling into his oil wells and stealing his oil, as soon as he took Kuwait, boom. We invaded and, kicked his butt, threw him back to Baghdad. But the war only lasted a couple of days. It was a 100-hour war. So it didn't quite get Bush the popularity he needed to get reelected, but it gave him a 10, 20, 30-point boost in the I don't remember the exact number, but it was huge. Suddenly, George Herbert Walker Bush, everybody thought he was a wimp. Oh, no, he's a war president. So his son says, I got to have some wars, too. And if I'm going to have a war, it's going to be, and this is what he told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, back in 1999, before he ran for president. He said, if I'm going to have a war, it's going to last long enough that it's a real war. My daddy just wasted all that political capital. I'm not going to waste that political capital, and I'm going to use that political capital to privatize Social Security, which had been his lifelong dream ever since he ran for Congress in 1978. In Texas, unsuccessfully, he lost on the single issue of privatizing Social Security. It's the Republicans' dream. So, here's this little war doctrine it doesn't work anymore. If George W. Bush had not tried to have his little war in Iraq, first in Afghanistan and then in Iraq, we would not have this mess all over the Middle East. And arguably, this all started, you know what got bin Laden started? Was Bush Sr., Daddy Bush, creating, for the very first time, a U.S. Air Force base in Saudi Arabia. That was the main complaint of bin Laden against us that led to 9/11. So Bush Sr.'s little war brought us 9/11. 9/11 gave Bush Jr. an opportunity for a couple of little wars. And now Donald Trump thinks he can have a little war with North Korea. Every single one of these Republican wars is getting more stupid. One last thing, just to put a punctuation point at the end of this rant. We don't have an ambassador to South Korea. The State Department is filled with unfilled posts. We don't have. This is the naked incompetence of the Trump administration, or I'm not even sure partisanship is the word, factionalism maybe, that Donald Trump doesn't want somebody serving in his administration unless they have basically, gone on national television and said that they want to kiss his butt and lay down in front of a bus in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue and get run over just to help him out, right? I mean, you just have to show loyalty and fealty and blind love for this man, like Scaramucci. And that didn't even help Scaramucci from getting fired. Right. It all happened within one Scaramucci, 10 days, bang, it's gone. So, you got to seriously suck up to this guy if you want a job in his administration, or at least a job that's going to last more than a few months. And, there's not a lot of diplomats who do that kind of thing. So he's doing what? Appointing Newt Gingrich's third wife to be the ambassador to the Vatican, which doesn't recognize marriage after the after the first marriage. His third wife, it's just bizarre. So anyhow, the net of all this is that the one thing that probably is our greatest hope for not engaging in World War III, for not stepping into a nuclear holocaust. The greatest hope is diplomacy. And Rex Tillerson wants to cut the budget of the State Department by between a quarter and a third. He's, all these senior positions that are not filled. It's like, the Republicans before Benghazi happened, voting down the State Department's request for increased security for facilities like Benghazi. The Republicans vote down the extra security, and then when something happens, they start screaming about it. Well, the Republicans could be, leading us into a nuclear war with North Korea, and there might not be any afterwards. So just to clarify on the 25th Amendment, the 25th Amendment says, and keep in mind, this was written after we'd had a president who had had a stroke in office, that was Woodrow Wilson, who had had a heart attack in office, that was Dwight Eisenhower, who'd been assassinated in office, this was John Kennedy. After 3 presidents in the lifetime of the people who wrote the 25th Amendment had been incapacitated in office. Oh, and Reagan was shot as well and was out of commission for a few days. Remember Al Haig saying, I'm in charge here. They decided there's got to be some kind of order of secession here that makes sense. And so the 25th Amendment says that basically if the vice president and one of 2 groups, and this is where it gets really interesting. One group is basically the president's cabinet, the senior officials in the White House. The other group is whatever group Congress designates. So if you could get it passed through the House of Representatives and the Senate that a group of 15 or 20 psychiatrists were the designated representatives of Congress to determine the health and ability of the president to continue his functions, that would be the group that under the 25th Amendment would make the decision. Congress can choose the group that they want. If they don't, they get the cabinet. So the vice president And this group transmits this to the President pro tem of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House, to Mitch McConnell and to Paul Ryan, and says, okay, here's we think the president is not capable of discharging his duties. The president then has 4 days to respond and say, no, I'm just fine. And if he does, he's back in power. And Congress then has 3 weeks to decide by a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate that body that they appointed, that group of psychiatrists or politicians or whoever that they appointed, or the cabinet, whoever wrote the letter telling them the president can't serve, they have 21 days to decide which it's going to be and decide who's going to be the next president of the United States. It's a pretty damn high bar at a partisan time, but this guy is getting scarier and scarier, and he's more and more frightening Republicans. So we'll see where this goes.